Hi, my favorite sixth graders. Welcome back. This is lesson 17 in the Saxon 7-6 books. For those of you who are not my students, but you're following along, we're in the third edition. Guys, today we're going to be talking about fractions and where they fall on the number line, right? Where they fall on the number line. So guys, we've got a number line, looks like this. And this is 0, 1, 2, right? And so what we're going to do is talk about where certain numbers fall on that number line. If I were to cut between 1 and 2 directly in half, that would be 1 and 1/2. 1 and 1/2, right? Hopefully that looks familiar. If I were to cut between 0 and 1, and if I were to cut that directly in half, I'd get 1/2. If I were to do 2 to 3, this would be 2 and 1/2. So I'd have 2 whole ones. And in fact, I'm going to make these nice and big so you can see that. 2 whole ones and 1/2. So guys, but after that, what comes in between are some other ones. So let's say I want to break this guy, the half. I want to break 1/2 into a half. And here, do you see now how I have 4 chunks? I switched colors, but I guess you can't really tell. Do you see how I have 4 chunks here? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks, right? This is the first out of 4 chunks. This is the second out of 4 chunks. Second out of 4. You see that's 2 out of 4 reduces down to 1/2. And this is the third out of 4 chunks. Third out of 4 chunks. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take this section right here and I'm going to redraw that guy so that I can get in there and really get some good information. So let's say I have it like this. Okay, we have 0 here and 1 here. So we've already established that halfway between 0 and 1 is 1/2, right? 1/2. All right, so we know that's that guy, that's that guy. This is a pretty big one. So now I'm going to switch to some other colors just so that we can follow along as we go. All right, so now we've already established that we know if I cut this in half and this in half, I now have 4 chunks. So this is going to be 1/4 and this will be 3/4. Okay, now let's say I cut it in chunks again. Let's cut everything in half. So if I do this, I have right here, 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 here. All right, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because I took those 8 and I cut them in, or I'm sorry, I took those 4 and I cut them in half. So I took 1/4 and I multiplied it by 1/2 and I ended up with 1/8. So cutting it in eighths. That doesn't really matter for this lesson right now, but if you see it, then that's helpful. So this is 1/8, 2, 3/8, 4/8. Oops, not 4/8. I'm sorry. That's the 5th one. 5/8, 6/8, 7/8. Bam. And then 8/8 would be over here. So now let's do it one more time. If I take 8 and I cut them in half, I'm going to have 16. I'm going to have 16. So if you take a look here, this might be a little bit too close to the other guys, the red. So I'm cutting all my chunks into. So now I have 1/16, okay? And I have 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16. It's not 4/16, I'm sorry. Let's try that again. That was 4/16, 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, 8/16, 9/16, 10/16, 11. Oh, this one would be 11/16. Nope, I messed up somewhere. Oh yeah, see, 10/16, 11/16, 12/16, 13/16, 14, 15/16. 15/16. So guys, why did I go all the way down to 16? That's because on a ruler, that's where we go. We get 16 little lines, right? So taking a look at my handy dandy ruler that I have here, you can see that there are 16, but they're really tiny, so I'm not going to make you count those, okay? So there are 16 little itty bitty spots, right? Another way that you may see this is if you know anybody that is a carpenter or even a mechanic, you may see tools that are often down to like, especially with the mechanics, you're gonna see wrenches and things like that say like 3/16 or 1/2, right? So that's helpful. And with people who like to woodwork, same thing there is that you wanna cut down to at least the 1/16 of an inch so that you can fit things in perfectly, right? If we only cut down to the 1/4 inch, that's a pretty big chunk. So like if we cut down to the 1/4 inch, that means we're missing a whole, quite a bit. So we got to go all the way down to the 16ths to make sure that things fit precisely. Now, as I mentioned, you probably heard me saying 1/16, 2/16, 3/16. What we've done here is, let's see if I can find another color that I think might help. Let's do green. So this is 1/16, like we mentioned. This is 2/16, but you can see it's actually 1/8. That's because if I divide 2 and 16 by 2, hopefully you can see that okay. It's not too far away. If I divide 2/16, divide that by 2, divide that by 2, I get 1/8, okay? 3/16, nothing. 4/16, let's try that, 4/16. Guys, that's this one right here. If I divide the top and bottom by 4, if I divide this by 4, I get 1. Divide this by 4, I get 4. So that gives me the 1/4. So you can kind of see that pattern emerging, right? So our 16ths are the tiniest denomination that we go to. All right, so let's talk about some of these other ones. Actually, I think that's probably it that you need for this lesson. Let's go ahead and do the practice problems that you are on page 80. So pause the video, do the practice problems, come on back when you're ready. Okay. This, for A, it says continue this sequence to 1 and 1/2. 1 and 1/2. I'm allowed to say and because it's a fraction of a number, right? Decimals and fractions, right? So 1 and 1/2. I'm gonna put this up here. I just don't want to mess up my recording. There we go. Okay, so we've got 1/16, 1/8, 3/16, 1/4, 5/16, right? So I think you're catching on to this pattern. It's exactly what I just showed you with that ruler, right? So if I were to convert all of these guys into having the same denominator, I'd have 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, I forgot my one there, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, 8/16. Okay, so then after that, 1, 2, 3, right? We're gonna have, here are the new problem, or the new answers, so that way you can see those. We're gonna have 9/16, 10/16, 11/16, 12/16, 13/16, 14/16, 15/16, 16/16, that's all the way up to 1. So let's simplify some of these. 9/16 I can't simplify. 10/16 I can cut those in half and get 5/8, right? So technically I would be writing 5/8. So yeah, let's move that up. So comma, 5/8. 11/16 can't reduce that guy. This one I can cut them in half and I get 6/8. But I can cut that in half again and get 3/4. That's 3/4. 13 out of 16 can't reduce that. This one I can cut in half and I would get 7/8. And then 15/16, and then 16/16 reduces down to 1, right? And then the pattern repeats itself. 1 and 1/16, I'm going back up here to check those guys out. 1 and 1/8, 1 and 3/16, 1 and 1/4, 1 and 5/16, 1 and, some weird looking comma there. 1 and 3/8, 1 and 7/16, 1 and 1/2. So guys, you can, oh, sorry about that. My fat head is in the way. All right. So you can always look at these and see You can always reduce them, right? You can always list them out, 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, and then just reduce them. But it's also a good idea just to memorize these guys in order. Like, okay, I've got 1/16, 1/8, which is 2/16, right? Memorize it or just be really familiar with it, that you can put these guys in order so that you can figure out, hey, which is smaller than which, right? If you need to, like I said, you can always put them into a common denominator. Okay. Next, for letter B, it says, what number is halfway between -2 and -3? And this is a really good question because when we're dealing with negatives, guys, it can be super tricky, right? So I've got -1, and I never draw these long enough. Make sure I'm not off the board there. -2, -3. Okay, so which number is halfway between -2 and -3? It's right here. When it's a negative number, it's a little bit tricky, but this is -2 and 1/2. -2 and 1/2. If you got something different and you're not sure why, let me know. I'd be happy to help. All right, what number is halfway between 2 and 5? 2 and 5. So again, I'm going to draw a number line, and I have 2, 3, 4, and 5. So which is halfway between this guy and this guy? Well, it's not 4 and it's not 3 because that's not evenly in half. It's right in between these two would cut it in half, right? And in between 3 and 4 is 3 and 1/2. Good. Okay, so the next question asks you to use your ruler to measure these lines that are in your book. Use a ruler. So go ahead and use a ruler and make sure that you've measured those correctly. And then when you have, let's double check that. All right, so if we take a look down here, bear with me. Okay, so you'll see that D is 13/16, E is 2 1/4, and the other one is 3 3/16. So if you look here, we go right there. Sure enough, it goes to the 13/16 line. And this guy right here, it's 2 and not a half, but a quarter, right? Because there's 1, 2. Let's see if I can point with this. Bear with me. I'll sharpen my pointer. Okay. So for this guy, it's 2 1/4, right? Because we come right here and we say 2, and then this is 2 1/2 right here, right? It's a little bit longer, and half of a half is a quarter, and so it goes right there. And then this last one, 3/16. So 3 3/16. You can kind of see that measurement right there. So those tend to be a little bit tricky measuring. As long as you get real close, unless you're going to be a carpenter, then you can't get real close. You got to be exactly precise. But for these, as long as you get close enough, I'll let you be off like by 1 or 2/16 because I totally understand. All right, so guys, if you have any questions, like I said, please feel free to ask me and I would be happy to help. Otherwise, good work and we'll see you in class. Totally lost my mouse. All right, have a good one.